We live in interesting times for the headlines. Presidential spokesman Salvador Panelo said he's excited to debate with human rights lawyer Amal Clooney and is welcome to defend Rappler chief Maria Ressa. Hong Kong's embattled pro-Beijing leader said a China extradition law that sparked unprecedented political unrest is dead. The U.S. State Department approves the potential sale to Taiwan of $2.2 billion in arms. President Trump launches an extraordinary attack on outgoing British Premier Theresa May, following the leak of diplomatic cables highly critical of his presidency. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us, and now to the news. Presidential spokesman Salvador Panelo said he's excited to debate with human rights lawyer Amal Clooney, and she's also welcome to defend Rappler CEO Maria Ressa. However, he also has doubts that she may have been deceived into joining her legal team. Clooney and Carl Fionn Gallagher, who both specialize in international law and human rights, will lead the team that will be working with lawyers in the United States and in Manila. Mr. Panelo also said attorneys Clooney and Gallagher can coordinate with Filipino lawyers, but they cannot appear before the Philippine courts.
Cannot appear because she's not a lawyer. Hindi siya member ng IBP. Kumbaga, baka consultant lang siya o spokesperson. I'm excited to debate with her. Gusto niya pagtanggol kami we will not, hayaan mo na siya. Kahit na sino kunin niya. Basta hindi sila pwede mag-practice dito. No, I don't think so. Mukhang nabola niya lang si nabola niya lang si Attorney Amal. Misinformed kasi si Attorney Amal. Siguro pag nakita kami, I can, to use the word of the President, educate her.
Mrs. Clooney, appointed special envoy for media freedom by the British government, also defended two Reuters journalists jailed for more than 16 months in Myanmar and freed in May. The cases against Ressa started with the revocation of Rappler's certification of incorporation for allegedly violating the constitutional restriction on foreign ownership of mass media. Ressa, who is facing alleged security fraud, tax evasion, and cyber libel charges before Philippine courts, has described these cases as harassment for critical reporting of the Duterte administration. Ressa to stop using press freedom as an excuse to attack the Duterte administration for her arrest. He said Ressa and other critics of the administration are proof that freedom of the press is alive in the country. To other news now, Indonesia said Tuesday it would send more than 210 tons of garbage back to Australia as Southeast Asian nations are pushing back now against serving as dumping grounds for foreign trash. The 8 containers seized in Surabaya City should have contained only waste paper, but authorities also found hazardous material and household trash, including plastic bottles and packaging, used diapers, electronic waste, and cans, according to a spokesman for the East Java Customs Agency. Authorities said Australian company Oceanic Multi-Trading sent the waste to Indonesia with help from Indonesian firm PTMBI. China's decision in 2018 to ban imports of foreign plastic waste threw global recycling into chaos, leaving developed nations struggling to find places to send their waste. In May, neighboring Malaysia announced it was shipping 450 tons of imported plastic waste back to its sources, including Australia, Bangladesh, Canada, China, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. The Philippines, meanwhile, returned about 69 containers of rubbish back to Canada last month, putting an end to a diplomatic row between the two countries. Hong Kong's embattled pro-Beijing leader said a China extradition bill that sparked unprecedented political unrest is dead. But protesters immediately dismissed her comments, threatening more mass rallies. The international finance hub has been plunged into its worst crisis in recent history by a month of marches and sporadic violent confrontations between police and pockets of hardcore protesters. On Tuesday, the city's chief executive, Carrie Lam, admitted her administration's attempt to introduce the bill was a complete failure, saying that her government would not seek to reactivate it in parliament.
I have almost immediately put a stop to the amendment exercise. But there are still lingering doubts about the government's sincerity, or worries whether the government will restart the process in the Legislative Council. So I reiterate here, there is no such plan. The bill is dead.
Mrs. Lam's words about the bill are another ridiculous lie tweeted leading democracy activist Joshua Wong, who was recently released from jail for his role in protests in 2014. He said the bill still exists in the legislative program until July next year. The Civil Human Rights Front, which has organized some of the mass rallies, said it would announce fresh protests over the coming days.
If our five demands still not to be heard by Carrie Lam and her government, the Civil Human Rights Front will continue to hold protest and assembly. We are discussing about the details and we will announce details later.
With calls mounting for her resignation, Mrs. Lam has made few public appearances in recent weeks. But on Tuesday, she resurfaced agreeing to meet student protesters and adding that she recognized the swirling economic, political, and social challenges facing the city.
I come to the conclusion that there are some fundamental, deep-seated problems in Hong Kong society. It could be economic problems, it could be livelihood issues, it could be political divisions in society. So the first thing we should do is to identify those fundamental issues and hopefully to find some solutions to move forward. I now readily welcome and agree to do this open dialogue with our student representatives, and we will follow up. I hope this open dialogue will be conducted without any prerequisites on my part or on the part of the students.
Mrs. Lam has been under pressure to appoint an independent judge as head of a public commission of inquiry into the police response to the protests. But she rejected those calls again on Tuesday, backing an existing police complaints body to investigate claims of excessive force. Protesters are becoming increasingly creative, though. Chat forums, encrypted messenger apps are buzzing with calls for the mass withdrawal of funds from the Bank of China this Saturday to stress test the organization's liquidity. Beijing has thrown its full support behind Mrs. Lam, calling on police to pursue anyone involved in the parliament storming and other clashes. Meanwhile, Hong Kong protest group Civil Human Rights, the group rejected Carrie Lam's most conciliatory remarks to date and threatened more mass rallies after the pro-Beijing city leader declared the widely loathed Chinese extradition law dead. Let's take a look.
The extradition bill being put in the Legislative Council is a very legal, very formal legal proceedings. However, she only said that the bill is dead. We cannot find the word dead in any of the laws in Hong Kong or any legal proceedings in the Legislative Council.
The protesters are demanding an independent investigation into alleged police abuse of force against demonstrators on June 12, when officers used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse the crowds blocking major streets.
如果一個人長期被虐待，心理治療係幫佢唔到㗎，最需要心理治療嗰個係施虐者，係林鄭月娥。
Mrs. Carrie Lam said that investigations would take place under the Department of Justice in accordance with the evidence, the law, and also the prosecution code. In other news, the U.S. State Department has approved the potential sale to Taiwan of $2.2 billion in arms, including Abrams tanks and Stinger missiles, according to the Pentagon. The announcement is likely to anger Beijing, which views Taiwan as part of its territory and has previously expressed serious concerns about the possible sale. It coincides with other strains in U.S.-China ties, particularly over trade. Congress has been notified about the potential deal, which would include 108 M1A2T Abrams tanks, about 250 Stinger missiles, related equipment and support, according to the Defense Security Cooperation Agency. U.S. lawmakers have 30 days to object to the sale but are unlikely to do so. Taiwan has been ruled separately since the end of a civil war in 1949, but China maintains it's a part of its territory to be retaken by force if necessary. In recent years, Washington has been wary of completing big-ticket arms deals with Taiwan, fearful of stoking China's anger. But President Trump, whose administration is locked in a trade war with Beijing that has seen the two sides impose tariffs on hundreds of billions in two-way commerce, has sought to strengthen ties with Taipei and appeared more willing to sell major weapon systems. Meanwhile, China has urged Washington to immediately cancel the potential sale of $2.2 billion in weapons to Taiwan, including battle tanks and anti-aircraft missiles. International trade in conventional weapons is worth an estimated $400 billion annually. The industry's products range from light weapons and small ammunition to larger-scale military defense systems. More than half of exports originate in the United States, Russia, China, France, and the UK are also major suppliers. Widely accessible weapons cause suffering and destruction, a global treaty aimed at reducing the irresponsible transfer of conventional weapons came into force in December of 2014. Its strict criteria controlling sales aims to ensure participating countries avoid breaking international embargoes and reduce the number of weapons used for genocide, war crimes, or terrorism. Despite widespread support, many of the 130 signatory countries, including the U.S., have still not ratified the Arms Trade Treaty, while Russia and China have not even signed it. The International Committee of the Red Cross says there's still a discrepancy between political commitments and the ease with which arms are transferred to actors who do not respect international law. Human rights watchdog Amnesty International says decades of irresponsible arms transfers to Iraq fueled the Islamic State group's firepower and ability to carry out atrocities on a massive scale. It says IS group is thought to have used arms and ammunition from at least 25 countries, including Iraq, the US, China, Germany, and Belgium. Eagle News International will be right back.
MTRCB.
President Donald Trump launched an extraordinary attack on outgoing British Premier Theresa May following the leak of diplomatic cables highly critical of his presidency. London has been scrambling to stem the damage caused by the weekend release of confidential telegrams in which its envoy to Washington, Kim Darroch, described the U.S. leader as inept. Darroch's cables branded President Trump's administration dysfunctional and inept. He also said there are doubts about whether the White House will ever look competent and that the only way to communicate with President Trump is by being simple and blunt. Visibly angered by May's continuing support for her ambassador, which Downing Street reiterated on Monday, President Trump assailed the Prime Minister over her handling of fraught Brexit negotiations and welcomed her impending departure from office. What a mess she and her representatives have created. Trump viewed in a series of tweets. I told her how it should be done, but she decided to go another way. The good news for the wonderful United Kingdom is that they will soon have a new prime minister, he wrote. As for London's man in Washington, Trump declared he would have no further contact with him. I do not know the ambassador, but he is not liked or well thought of within the U.S., the president said, doubling down on the weekend comments claiming his administration were not big fans of Darroch. Then President Trump vowed we will no longer deal with him. The cable's publication in the Mail on Sunday newspaper came just a month after Trump enjoyed a state visit to Britain that included a 41-gun salute welcome at Buckingham Palace and a banquet dinner with the Queen. The incident threatens to complicate London's efforts to strike a new trade agreement with key ally, the United States, in the hope of mitigating potential damage from Britain's withdrawal from the European Union. Prime Minister Theresa May's office called the leak unacceptable, but said the Prime Minister has full faith in her ambassador to Washington. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump once again denounced the unfair, ineffective, and very, very expensive Paris Climate Accord during a speech on America's environmental leadership. President Trump announced in June 2017 that the U.S. was pulling out of the Paris Agreement, concluded in 2015 with almost every nation on the planet. The pact aims to limit global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius. Now, his administration has eased environmental regulations, and last year, He said he didn't believe his own government report warning of massive economic losses if carbon emissions continue to feed climate change unchecked. President Trump has promoted the use of fossil fuels, and he tried to unwind more stringent fuel standards for vehicles.
They sought to punish our workers, our producers, and manufacturers with ineffective global agreements that allowed the world's worst polluting countries to continue their practices. These radical plans would not make the world cleaner. They would just make and put Americans out of work. And punishing Americans is never the right way to produce a better environment or a better economy. We've rejected this failed approach, and we're seeing incredible results. Every single one of the signatories to the Paris Climate Accord lags behind America in overall emissions reduction. Based on its tremendous success, we're just making the decision, and I think we can say we've made the decision to do it again next year, and maybe we can say for the foreseeable future.
Reacting on Twitter, former Vice President Al Gore said Trump is refusing to see reality. Gore, co-winner of the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize for his activism on climate change, said that American voters aren't fooled by the president's attempts to cover up his failed environmental record. In October, a landmark United Nations report warned that time is running out to avert disaster and that avoiding global climate chaos will require an unprecedented transformation of society and the world economy. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security requested 1,000 additional soldiers to help manage the migrant crisis in Texas, according to the Pentagon, amid growing outcry over conditions in migrant detention facilities. In a statement, the Pentagon said they had been asked to authorize the Texas National Guard to lend support to Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, officials who say they are overwhelmed by the number of refugees crossing the southern U.S. border. The Guard members will help manage CBP-run holding facilities for single adult migrants in the towns of Donna on the eastern end of the border with Mexico and Ternillo, which is in the middle of the border. They will also provide support at ports of entry and commercial airports in El Paso and Laredo in order to improve border security and traffic flow. The Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, has been criticized after a report from its Inspector General, a watchdog, last week warned about dangerous overcrowding in migrant detention facilities in Texas. To other news now, Iran breached a uranium enrichment cap set by a troubled 2015 nuclear deal, and they warned Europe against taking retaliatory measures. Now, France decided to send an envoy to Tehran to try to calm the tensions. Now, this comes just days after Iran acknowledged breaking the 300-kilogram limit on its low-enriched uranium stockpile, another term of the accord. After Tehran's latest step, U.S. President Trump held talks with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron on ongoing efforts to ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon and to end Iran's destabilizing behavior in the Middle East, the White House said in a statement. Iran surpassing the cap and reaching 4.5% enrichment was announced by the country's Atomic Energy Organization spokesman, Behruz Kamalvandi. France, Germany, and Britain, the European partners of the international deal, also urged Tehran to halt its advance towards breaching the cap, as Paris said it was sending a special envoy to Tehran on Tuesday and Wednesday to try to de-escalate tensions. Iran's foreign ministry warned against any escalatory response. If the Europeans do certain strange acts, then we would skip all the next steps in the plan to scale back commitments and implement the last one, ministry spokesman Abbas Mousavi said. Now, he didn't specify what the final step would be, but President Hassan Rouhani had warned previously that Iran could leave the nuclear accord. Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif reiterated that Iran's actions could be reversed if European partners deliver on their part, insisting there was no better pact than the 2015 deal, of which he was a key architect. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeted Sunday that Iran would face further isolation and sanctions. China and Russia, the other deal partners, both blamed the United States for the latest step by Iran. Beijing accused Washington of unilateral bullying, while Moscow said passing the enrichment cap was one of the consequences of the White House abandoning the deal. The United Nations says over 460,000 suspected cholera cases have been recorded in war-battered Yemen so far this year, a sharp rise from the 380,000 cases for all of 2018. Here's UN Deputy Spokesman Farhan Haq.
As of today, the outbreak of cholera in Yemen has reached over 460,000 suspected cases this year, including approximately 200,000 children. This exceeds the 380,000 total suspected cases in all of 2018. So far this year, 705 deaths have been recorded from suspected cholera versus 75 deaths in the same period last year. Recent flash flooding has accelerated the spread of cholera cases across the country, which has also been exacerbated by poor maintenance of waste management systems and lack of access to clean water for drinking or irrigation. This year, the UN and partners are running nearly 1,200 cholera treatment facilities around the country. However, funding remains an urgent issue. The Yemen Humanitarian Response Plan requires $4.2 billion to deliver humanitarian assistance to more than 20 people this year. As of today, only 32% of those requirements have been met.
Hack also said the spread of cholera has been accelerated by recent flash flooding, poor maintenance of waste management systems, and lack of access to clean water. The United Nations and its partners are operating nearly 1,200 cholera treatment facilities across Yemen. But Mr. Hack says funding remains an urgent issue. To Hawaii now, at least twice each year, mayors throughout the U.S. gather themselves in designated cities not only to address current issues, but also to share ideas that they can bring back home. Now this summer, the non-partisan group gathered in Honolulu, and our Hawaii correspondent Alfred Acenas highlights their 4-day annual meeting. Take a look.
It's been over 50 years since the City and County of Honolulu has hosted the U.S. conference. 1963, when our President John F. Kennedy came out here and talked about civil rights. And in that speech, he said he hoped that someday the rest of his country would look like the City and County of Honolulu in terms of diversity and inclusion. And then in 1967, we hosted it again, and never since. And I'm just so honored and so proud to have so many mayors from all over our country here in our city.
More than 220 mayors across the U.S., plus community and business leaders from around the world, along with their families and guests, all gathered at the Hilton Hawaiian Village in Waikiki for the 87th annual meeting of the United States Conference of Mayors. One of the events on day one included a press briefing led by the mayor of Columbia, South Carolina.
Common goals unite all of us as Americans. We want clean air, we want good jobs, we want to enjoy good health, we want the freedom to achieve our dreams, we want to make sure our children can look forward to a very bright future. One common goal unites all of us as mayors. We want to find the very best possible ways to support the people who live in our cities, help them pursue their objectives and live up to their God-given potential. That's what brings us all of us here to Honolulu.
Throughout the 4-day convention, exhibits from the public and private sectors were also on display to showcase services, programs, and technologies for the attending mayors to know more and consider implementing in their own municipalities.
So we're here at the U.S. Conference of Mayors to help promote the 100% Promise. That is our new campaign to get mayors to sign on 100% park access in their cities by 2050. So the whole idea is to expand the access to green space and parks in their cities, make sure people can get there easily within a 10-minute walk of home is the real metric. And this is really, it's wonderful to be here at the U.S. Conference of Mayors because we have 250 mayors that have already pledged to make that happen in their cities, including Mayor Caldwell here in Honolulu.
ST North America is doing a demonstration of technology here in Honolulu, and we've been invited by Mayor Caldwell and his team to have 2 kiosks, smart kiosks, which you can see standing behind me, as part of his community outreach. And what we're doing is leveraging technologies and deployment of this capability that's already exists in our company in Singapore, ST Engineering, that's deployed globally throughout 77 other cities, and we're introducing that technology here in the U.S. at the Council of Mayors.
Hawaii Governor David Ige was just one of many distinguished guests invited to the annual forum. Others, to name a few, included Tokyo Governor Yoriko Koike, Second Lady Barbara Pence, former U.S. Ambassador Caroline Kennedy, and Hawaii Congresswoman and currently presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard. The mayors were also treated visits to Iolani Palace, the USS Arizona Memorial, and USS Battleship Missouri, both at Pearl Harbor, and even a housing community for those who are homeless. Given that Caldwell is already in his second term, which will end next year, he offered some advice to whoever will have the privilege to succeed him.
Well, one, I think they need to come join the U.S. Conference of Mayors. They need to go to all of the meetings, and they should actually join up in committees, become a chair or vice chair of committee. You're going to learn so much from this organization that is going to serve you well in your hometown city. And that would be my first recommendation to whoever's mayor after me.
Meanwhile, preparations are already underway for the 2020 Conference of Mayors that will be held in Austin, Texas. Reporting from Waikiki, Hawaii, I'm Alfred Asenas, 1 with 25.
Thank you, Alfred. We'll be back with more news right after this break. Stay tuned.
Sa gitna ng dilim, ako ang mata sa sahing papawid. Ako ang dilat sa tuwing ang bayan ko ay tulog ng mahimbing. Ang aming buhay, handang ialay para sa bayan. Kayo'y handang maglingkuran.
Join us in celebrating the 72nd anniversary of the Philippine Air Force.
Welcome back. The Monetary Board approved public sector loans in 2018 amounting to $7.355 billion, higher by $3.869 billion, 111%, from the 2017 level of $3.486 billion as the government ramped up spending on infrastructure development. These public sector loans consisted of A, 3.6 billion bonds, B, 12 project loans amounting to $2.9 billion and C, 3 program loans amounting to $900 million. Now, these public sector borrowings will fund projects on transport connectivity, roads, railways, port and airport infrastructure, irrigation and agriculture development, flood management, and the reconstruction and development of Marawi City. Out of the $7.355 billion total approved public sector loans, about 18% of loans, or slightly over $1.359 billion, will fund 5 infrastructure flagship projects, or IFPS, under the Build program, which seeks to accelerate infrastructure spending and generate robust economic growth and employment. Now, these projects include the Metro Manila Subway projects, Phase 1, Chico River Pump Irrigation Project, New Cebu International Container Port Project, New Bohol Airport Construction, and Sustainable Environment Protection Project, Phase 2, and Cavite Industrial Area Flood Risk Management Project. European stock markets retreated on Tuesday with the biggest declines in share prices seen in Frankfurt following a profit warning from German chemicals giant BASF. Asian indices mostly closed down as investors awaited the start of testimony from U.S. Fed Reserve head Jerome Powell later. Clues on the outlook for U.S. interest rates are keenly awaited after the country's recent strong jobs report threw into doubt expectations for a deep cut in American borrowing costs later this month to help boost the economy. Equities are weaker and the dollar firmer as the prospect of the Fed not being as dovish as the market wants it to be takes the shine off things, according to Neil Wilson, analyst for Markets.com. Frankfurt was down a hefty 1.3% heading into midday trading, while London fell 0.3% and Paris shed 0.7% compared with the closing levels on Monday. The euro and pound dropped versus the dollar, while oil prices rose. Now, elsewhere on Tuesday, the Wall Street Journal reported that Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic will become the first publicly traded space tourism project thanks to a New York-listed company's investment worth about $800 million. Social Capital Hedosophia Holdings Corp. will take a 49% stake in Virgin Galactic, according to people familiar with the matter. The WSJ said. The paper added that the capital injection from the Special Purpose Acquisition Company, or SPAC, will enable British billionaire Branson to fund Virgin Galactic until its spaceships are able to commercially operate and become profitable.
20 seconds.
Meanwhile, this next video will show us how holidays in space may soon become the latest craze. The Wall Street Journal reported that Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic will become the first publicly traded space tourism project thanks to a New York-listed company's investment worth about $800 million. Take a look.
A holiday in space. It's a dream that could soon become a reality. Today, the conquest of the space tourism market is dominated by 2 private US companies, Virgin Galactic, founded by British billionaire Richard Branson, and Amazon chief Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin. Neither is offering an orbit of the Earth. Rather, tourists will be propelled dozens of miles into the atmosphere for just a few minutes. The aim is to get close to the imaginary line where space begins, the Kármán line, 100 kilometers up where the sky darkens and the curvature of the Earth can clearly be seen. Virgin Galactic will have 6 passengers on board Spaceship 2 VSS Unity, attached to a carrier spacecraft. Once released at an altitude of 15,000 meters, the spacecraft will fire its rocket and head for the sky. There, passengers will float in zero gravity for several minutes before returning to Earth at Virgin's spaceport in the Mojave Desert in New Mexico. Price for ticket, $250,000. Blue Origin has developed the New Shepard, a traditional rocket carrying a capsule with a capacity of 6. After the launch, the capsule breaks away and continues its journey while the rocket returns to Earth. Passengers will be able to leave their seats and for a few minutes take advantage of the view through large windows. The capsule then falls gently to Earth. SpaceX and Boeing are developing their own capsules to transport NASA astronauts from 2020. They're likely to cushion their investment by offering private tourist flights. A US startup called Orion Span hopes to place a luxury space hotel into orbit. The company says it hopes to welcome its first guests in 2022.
And Beijing is set to open an eye-catching multi-billion-dollar airport resembling a massive shining starfish to accommodate soaring air traffic in China and celebrate the communist government's 70th anniversary in power. Work on the Beijing-Daxing International Airport officially ended on schedule Sunday, ready for a September 30 inauguration on the eve of the anniversary of the foundation of the People's Republic on October 1, 1949 by Mao Zedong. Celebrations of that event will see President Xi Jinping reviewing a huge military parade through the center of Beijing with the opening of the futuristic hub, a fitting embodiment of the Chinese dream he has offered his fellow citizens. Located 46 kilometers south of Tiananmen Square, the new airport will operate at full capacity in 2025 with 4 runways and the potential to receive 72 million passengers per year. By 2040, the hub is expected to have expanded to 8 runways, including 1 for military use, and will be able to welcome 100 million passengers per year, which will make it the world's largest single terminal in terms of traveler capacity, according to its designers. The country will see 1.6 billion plane journeys each year from 2037, a billion more than in 2017, the organization estimates. Now, China's capital, with its 21 million people, expects to welcome 170 million passengers in 2025, split between the 2 airports. At 700,000 square meters, about the size of 100 football pitches, the new structure will be one of the world's largest airport terminals. The building was designed by Anglo-Iraqi architect Zaha Hadid, who died in 2016, in conjunction with the engineering subsidiary of Aéroports de Paris. Inside, it stands out for its flowing, curved lines and use of light that filters down to the lowest levels of the building through openings in the roof. Under the terminal is a train station and metro line that will allow travelers to reach the city center in 20 or so minutes. The project cost 120 billion yuan or $17.5 billion or 400 billion if rail and road links are included. And the French government is to impose a tax of up to 18 euros or $20 on plane tickets for all flights from airports in France to fund less polluting transportation projects, according to a minister on Tuesday. The move, which will take effect from 2020, will see a tax of 1.5 euros imposed on economy class tickets on internal flights and those within Europe, with the highest tariff applied to business class travelers flying outside the bloc, Transport Minister Elizabeth Bourne said. Now the new measure is expected to bring in some 182 million euros a year, which will be invested in greener transport infrastructures, notably rail, she said. It will only be applied on outgoing flights and not those flying into the country, she added. A similar tax was introduced in Sweden in April 2018, which imposed an added charge of up to 40 euros on every ticket in a bid to lessen the impact of air travel on the climate. Instagram will introduce new features aimed at curbing online bullying, the Facebook-owned platform announced, as social media giants face increased scrutiny over the harassment faced by many users. And there have been growing calls around the world for greater oversight of platforms like Facebook and Twitter amid widespread criticism over bullying as well as the spread of hate speech and fake news. The company said it has used artificial intelligence to monitor bullying and harmful content for years and will now use the technology to detect when a user is about to post something offensive and issue a warning. This intervention gives people a chance to reflect and undo their comment, Adam Mosseri, the head of Instagram, said in a statement. The other new feature, Restrict, is aimed at limiting abusive comments on a user's feed. We've heard from young people in our community that they're reluctant to block, unfollow, or report their bully because it could escalate the situation, especially if they interact with their bully in real life, Mosseri said. Now they will be able to make posts from an offending person visible only to that person. Restricted people won't be able to see when you're active on Instagram or when you've read their direct messages. Instagram's move is the latest in a series of steps taken by social media networks to protect users, especially from younger segments of society. Firms like Facebook, in response, have rolled out policy changes and features aimed at increasing transparency and safety. Meanwhile, the EU's top antitrust regulator on Wednesday fined Hello Kitty owner Sanrio 6.2 million euros for illegally blocking retailers from selling merchandise across bloc borders. Consumers, whether they're buying a Hello Kitty mug or a Choco Cat toy, can now take full advantage of one of the main benefits of the EU single market, the ability to shop around Europe for the best deal, said Competition Commissioner Margrethe Vestager. The relatively low fine came as a result of Sanrio's cooperation in the case, which was jointly launched against Nike and Universal Studio. In March, the Commission fined Nike 12.5 million euros with no decision yet taken against Universal. The case is part of the EU's ambition to build a digital single market across the Union of 28 countries and 500 million people, which as a bloc is the world's biggest economy. The Commission is especially keen to fight companies that break EU competition rules by restricting a manufacturer's or retailer's ability to sell licensed merchandise cross-border and online. These deals limit consumers' ability to shop for highly popular merchandise products across the EU borders in the hunt for cheaper prices. We'll be back with more news right after this break.
Visiting the Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. Some of the species that you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
Welcome back. Roger Federer can rack up his 100th win at Wimbledon on Wednesday and set up a blockbuster semifinal against Rafael Nadal in a quarterfinal lineup which features 5 players over 30. There's a growing anticipation of a potential 40th career matchup between the sport's 2 most successful players. If it does happen, it will be their first at the All-England club since 2008 when Nadal triumphed in what is widely regarded as the greatest final ever played at the tournament. However, before they reach that stage, 8-time champion Federer has to get past Kei Nishikori, while Nadal, a 2-time winner, tackles big-hitting Sam Carey. Whoever battles through that side of the draw is likely to find defending champion and 4-time winner Novak Djokovic waiting in the final. At 37, Federer is the oldest quarter-finalist since Jimmy Connors in 1991. Amsterdam's Rijksmuseum began the biggest ever restoration of Rembrandt's The Night Watch, building a giant glass case around the famed painting so the world can see the work carried out live. Take a look.
The Night Watch is one of the most famous paintings in the world. More than 2.5 million people come and see it each year. It belongs to everybody who lives in the Netherlands for the world, and we felt that the public has the right to see what happens to their painting. We assess the condition of the painting every day, and since the last conservation we see that there are changes in the painting. On the surface there's on parts a light haze appearing, there's some deformation in the canvas, and we want to discover what it is and how we can best treat it.
Considering the size of the painting, it's really not possible to take it out of the galleries. You know, that also imposes a certain risk for the painting, and I think also considering we don't really know how long the treatment will take, I think this is really, you know, the most optimal situation.
And once again, Spider-Man is trapping everything that flies by. Spider-Man Far From Home took an impressive $185.1 million in North America over the long U.S. holiday weekend period, according to industry watcher Exhibitor Relations. The latest smash hit in the Spider-Man franchise, made by Sony and Disney-owned Marvel, has already passed the $500 million mark worldwide. Its storyline follows on from blockbuster Avengers Endgame to focus on how Spider-Man, played by Tom Holland, confronts a world without Iron Man. Samuel L. Jackson, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Zendaya also star. Released in domestic theaters Tuesday ahead of Independence Day, Far From Home collected $92.6 million over the regular Friday to Sunday weekend. Coming in second over the same period was Disney Pixar film Toy Story 4, taking $33.9 million on its third weekend.
This is Mr. Beck. We could have used someone like you on my world.
Your world? Beck is from Earth, just not ours. The snap to our hole in it.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on Eagle News International, I'm Alma Angeles. Always one with 25.